Hi everyone. Welcome back to A Sky Full of Stars, episode 31. And we're starting to see all the different elements pieced together. We're going back to the childhood stories over and over again. And it's going to explain why Akito and maybe Hikari and Saya and why they stopped looking at stars. So, Akito and Saya really looked up to Hikari. They kind of saw her as this leader in trying to get them to do astronomy. And Hikari was always bold, always pushing for new ideas. And after the stargazing event, they had their own meetup. But unfortunately, Hikari announced that she's leaving the area because of her father's job transfer. So her father worked on the railways, and because of the new dam that's being constructed, or back then, his railway line got shut down, and he's being reassigned to another railway. So Akito and Saya were thinking of ideas to try to keep Hikari and her family, or Hikari's family here. And one idea was to force the dam project to be cancelled. So, obviously they're little kids, and they don't really know much. But let's see how it unfolds and why did it lead to the fight that we keep hearing about. Okay, so can we even do that though?
まさか、ダムに爆弾仕掛けるとか。
So you're going to blow it up or sabotage it? Well, that's what Akito is probably thinking of. So Hikari went white as a sheet. Well, don't be stupid. Where would we even get dynamite? But what is Akito trying to do then?
他にどんな方法が。自由研究の宿題だよ。
The Saya said with the air of importance.
ダムの研究するの？
No. If there's one thing we do know about, what is it?
星？
Saya and I nodded.
星の自由研究をやるの。それでね、コンクールで優勝するんだよ。
Oh, okay. So well, how about we try to make some big project so when you, Hikari, eventually leave this area, we'll have something really great to remember about. So for once, Saya was brimming with confidence. So how about we make some science project about stars? That'll be so great that we'll win an award, and that'll be a good memory to keep once we part ways. And after Hikari ran off that afternoon, the two of us had discussed in depth how we could stop the dam from being constructed. And we talked about blowing it up, building a bridge across the water for the train to run on, and other plans that were just unrealistic. But eventually, Sai came up with an idea that might work. So I was like, well, so obviously all those ideas are kind of crazy, but at least there's something that sounds reasonable. And it kind of shows that Saya is kind of smart.
夏休みの宿題の自由研究で優秀なのは市のコンクールに出されるの知ってる？
And there's lots of perks with this contest.
うん、知ってる。お姉ちゃんが昔選ばれたことあった。
And do you know what the winner of the contest gets? A trophy? Some money?
わかんない。お姉ちゃん落選して努力賞の鉛筆と消しゴムもらっただけだったから。
Well, at least she got something.
市長さんから表彰状がもらえるんだよ。
Really? So don't you get it? We get to meet the mayor. Oh, okay. So well, when we do get to meet the mayor, maybe we can voice our concerns to the mayor about the dam, and maybe he'll consider it and change his mind about building it. So Hikari finally saw what we were getting at. There you go. And all those publicity, isn't that great? And when we get enough support, it'll convince them to stop the dam. And therefore, the railway project or the railway work is saved. Well, if it's coming from 3 great contest-winning students, they'd actually listen to what we have to say. Well, actually, I knew we didn't have a better plan than this. It was the best thing us 3 kids could do. So, what does Hikari think? So, Hikari? So, tears were welling up in the corners of Hikari's eyes. But they weren't like the tears of sorrow we'd seen earlier that day. Duh. Well, of course we would. Well, besides, we don't want to lose you, Hikari, right? So, unable to hold back her emotions, Hikari hugged us both close. Oh, wow. Hey, be gentle. Don't get all rowdy like you usually are. Yeah, it'll be like a trip through the galaxy. We'll write it all down. So let's go then. So I always enjoy watching the stars, but that was the day we took our first real steps into the world of astronomy. So now instead of just looking at stars, they're going to do research and write a huge paper about it and presenting it to the public. So our journey across the universe, one star at a time. And from then on, our days in the Mikazuki Astronomy Club took on a new sense of purpose. Okay, so I wonder what Akito is doing in present time. So he's messaging someone. Really? That'd be great. Okay. So it looks like they were able to find some way to bring the 2 upset astronomy clubs back in. So I think Keisuke was the representative for I think it was the Morimisawa Academy Astronomy Club. Okay.
姫さん、そういうのいいから。それより次集まるのいつだっけ？
Well, hopefully Naruto is not the person who's gonna blow it again, like she did the first time.
次の会合は
へえ、これがその観測記録なんだ。
So I think this time they met up at Akito's school, and it's not the brightest or the most exquisite of the 6 schools. Okay, so the Six Stars Club had gathered in Hoshino Daiichi's run-down astronomy club room. Everyone was carefully examining the book. Well, it's more like Akito's apartment at this point. So that torn and battered old notebook. So the planetary observation journal we made as kids.
1年もかけて惑星の軌道や見え方を詳細に記録してあります。
これはすごいですね。
And it seemed like they were really surprised at the quality of our work as kids. And meanwhile, I sat to one side, smoothing out the Ancient One's evil eye. Okay, so it looks like they were able to find some way to move this really heavy object from the train car to the school.
スケッチにも色が塗られていて可愛らしいですわね。
And even Orihime is impressed at what she's seen.
端々のコメントも面白いですよ。これなんて。
So this is our own original constellation, and we call it the Big Dumpling.
それ書いたの私だ。
If you remember, that was how Akito first met up with the Komako office lady. So he saw a picture that resembled the Big Dumpling. And we do know now that the office lady is Hikari.
アキトたちと遊んでて夕飯の餃子を食べ損ねて悔しかったから星座にしてやったんだよね。星座って自分で勝手に作ってもいいの？
So Karuna spoke up from her position at the back where she was jumping up and down, desperately trying to get a look at the notebook. Okay,
世界共通の星座として88個の星座が定められているけれど、もともとは大昔の人々が思い思いに空想したのが始まり。
okay, so it's like, well, we do have some official constellations, like the Big Dipper, Orion's Belt, Little Dipper, but you can always make your own. It's just that these, well, actually, they were also made by people in the past, and it was made so long ago that it's been passed down from time to time. So, pretty much, many people know about it. It's now in the history books. So,
想像の赴くままに星をつないで自分たちだけの星座を作ることは自由なのよ。
and of course, the universe is always changing. Stars are dying, stars grow. And when things change, it can create new opportunities to make new constellations.
へえ。
So Corona was deeply moved, though I don't think the Big Dumpling was responsible for that. Even if it was supposed to be a pun, it was a pretty bad one.
この記録を星のダム建設反対のために？
Yeah, well, that was our plan. I spoke with a bitter smile. Hikari mirrored my expression. And looking back on it now, trying to win a competition and get an audience with the mayor was a pretty dumb idea. Well, I'm sure it isn't dumb, especially when you think about it back then. And, well, for most people, it was an honor to meet with someone of like a high official with high honor. It's just that the content that's going to be presented to the mayor, that's quite embarrassing when they look at it after all these years. And I'm sure for most people they don't mind because they were really cool as little kids because they were able to come with this crazy idea and have it be accepted or read by the mayor. And as if that would have any effect on a big project like a dam construction. Well, at least the mayor would tell them, well, I understand about your concerns for the dam, and I will consider it. And I'm pretty sure at a minimum, the mayor would find some way to give compensation or at least comfort the little kids. Well, it was the best we could come up with back then. And I'm sure that's true. I said, as I examined the piece of glass I'd been sanding down, trying to get the surface more curved. At first, we recorded our observations over half a year and used it as our 6th grade summer homework. It was picked as the best in school and even to the citywide contest, but it didn't get that far. So we decided to try an even better project on the same topic for our winter vacation homework. And the end result was this notebook. We didn't just increase the time scale, we also made our observations more detailed and did extra research to supplement them. And construction on the dam was still a long way from starting, and we were able to make sure, or we were sure that we'd still be in time to stop this construction. So, I'm actually surprised that Nare is here. But anyways, I'm sure it's like, compared to all these other people, Saya, Hikari, and Akito have pretty deep history with astronomy compared to these people. So they probably got interested in astronomy not too long ago, maybe like 1 or 2 years ago, compared to Hikari and Akito, where they've been doing this ever since little kids. It's like 10 years ago, or like 7 years ago. So Nare, the student from Nishi High, seemed a little envious.
私だってこんなちゃんとした観測記録つけたことないよ。
自分もです。いつも星を眺めるだけで探索らしいことを感じてる。
That's true. Well, they were treating Hikari and me like celebrities. Oh, okay, so Saya didn't show up at this meeting. And I don't think she's part of the Six Stars Club. Well, really, it's nothing. But maybe they were right. Odds are even adult astronomy amateurs would struggle to make something like this. Well, I think it's more like, as adults, they kind of put practicality and realism into their work. So it's like, well, it is really cool and exciting to make a journal like this, but it takes time and devotion. And as adults, like, well, I think I can allocate time to other things that are more productive than something like this. It was a whole year worth of data after all. We made it with the kind of passion only kids could keep up. Not to mention, we had a definite goal in mind and had lots of free time. So yeah, the free time part.
私たちも負けてはいられないわね。このノートのような素晴らしい観測記録を残していきましょう。
Well, it's a good idea. Says Orihime, like, well, we should try to do the same thing as well.
いい目標ができましたわ。お、ねえアキニ、このノートなんで破れてるの？
Oh, so it looks like Corona pointed something out. And we do know that having it torn up serves an important part of the notebook. Well, you see, I didn't really want to explain that right now.
いろいろあったのよ。余計な詮索するんじゃないの。
Well, it's nothing now, so... Wait a minute.
ねえ、これあんたら二人でつけてたのかい？
うん、違います。もう一人。
Okay, so at least Hikari and Akito credited that Saya was part of this as well.
かよいつまちゃんだ。やっほー。
And at the right time, it looks like Saya is here. So the commuter wife, if you remember that, all the way from the beginning. So speaking of which, so I'm pretty sure Akito's going to gladly let Saya into the club room, even though there's a meeting going on. So everyone looked confused about how I could tell someone was coming before the door had even opened.
失礼します。
And their eyes all went to the girl in the Seisen uniform as she came into the room. So I wonder how Saya reacts to all this going on. So having unexpectedly become the center of attention, Saya took a surprise step back. So I don't think Saya enjoys all those stares and glares at her. So she was on the verge of turning to run, but Hikari and I caught her on either side and dragged her in. It's like, come on, don't worry, it's okay. We won't bite. The such. Oh, so this is Saya, and so I'm not sure what he means by the Mikazuki Astronomy Club's conscience.
毒もキュービ少女の。はじめまして、天の川。
Okay, so Saya introduces herself to everyone. Hey, hold on. So use the secret name like we told you. Wait, so what's her secret name? Saya blushed at my whispered instruction.
本当に言わなきゃダメなの？
Well, you do if you want to join.
聖戦女子天文部アステローベの天の川さやです。
Okay, so Saya will represent the Seisen Girls Academy. So Saya topped off her introduction with a little bow while the others gasped in admiration.
不思議な瞳をしてますね。
本当ですね。
So I like how when Saya steps in, everyone just changes topics and they start looking at Saya in her eyes. And it's exactly what happened many years ago when Saya was a new student at the school.
これまたクオリティ高いのが来たわね。ちょっと姫さんと並んでみて。
Wait, really? So next to Orihime?
何ですの？
So for what?
いい勝負だわ。
Wow, I'm envious. Two beauties in this room.
アイドルユニットみたいです。
But for Noriko, it's quite exciting.
姫ちゃんの方が美人だよ。
So obviously Corona doesn't really like Saya, so she's trying to root for the other person, Orihime. So leading by the Dobsonian project, Nishihai and Moromisawa had rejoined the Six Stars Club. So they finally agreed. And I remember when Akito first pitched that idea, they were still skeptical. It's like, well, I will still participate, but I'm not going to be a full member. I'm just going to observe and probably go to some of the activities. And Corona also joined as a junior member. And we had received one more application. The Saya Amanogawa of Asterope from the Seisen Girls Astronomy Club. And I do remember that Saya mentioned that there were other people in the Astronomy Club, but they're just doing manga and using the Astronomy Club as a title to circumvent all the rules. So Saya is actually the true astronomy person. So now we have at least one person from each of the 6 schools. But obviously for Amahai there's 2. So Noriko and Hikari, and for Meiko Academy we have Orihime and Honoka. Well, I'm pretty sure Orihime is going to graduate, so it's just going to be Honoka representing Meiko Academy.
ちゃんがいるから七つ星じゃないでしょうか。
お、じゃあこれでプレアデス7姉妹が揃ったってことですね。
Oh, so we're really the Pleiades cluster then, the Seven Sisters?
何それ何それ。
What do you mean?
あなたにも特別な名を授けましょう。その名はメローペ。プレアデス7姉妹の末の妹よ。メローペ、なんかかっこいい。
That's cool. So Karuna's eyes lit up with excitement. She was definitely the youngest of the group.
それではむつら星会議を始めましょうか。
Okay, so now we can have a true Six Stars Club meeting. And if you remember, the Pleiades cluster is what the Subaru logo is. And I did mention that when Orihime first brought it up. So remember when... So each school has some kind of star that represents them. And Akito couldn't mention his. And Orihime had to help him. And she finally mentioned that, well, you're Maya. So Maya's like the oldest of the Pleiades sister. So I stopped my glasswork and went to join the others.
今日集まっていただいたのは他でもない私たちの天体望遠鏡自作プロジェクトについて話し合うためです。
計画書見たよ。ちょっと面白そうだって思った。
So Nari chipped in, making the reasons for their return plan. So I was like, well, after looking at it for a second time, we can see that there is some hope and we're kind of interested in helping you out with this. So Keisuke, you said you already looked at the plans, right?
ええ、工具はうちの学校にあるものでほとんどです。もし足りなくても先輩や先生に相談すれば借りられると思います。
So in terms of budget issues, I'm sure we can make this one work somehow. And if it does go over, I think it's possible to find some way to get the extra money. So remember the original plan that Orihime was thinking of? It costed about 7 times the amount of budget that a typical astronomy club got. So that's why it was way too expensive.
となると、あとは材料と費用ですね。
So materials and funds. So the donations hadn't been as forthcoming as we expected. Well, that was because the Six Stars Club was in limbo back then. And with all these different schools opting out, it just wasn't stable, and there was nothing really going on top of that. So maybe now with the Six Stars Club coming to full swing, the donations might be coming in faster than before. So getting money out of former members wasn't easy, even the ones who were still into astronomy. I'm sure some of them even moved on or they moved out of the area. And several had given it up and didn't feel much affinity for the Six Stars Club anymore. And I do remember that it was these people that kind of broke up the club. They were fighting and had their own opinions on everything and the politics.
そこは廃材とか集めてきて代用すればいいんじゃない？
So how about we find some scrap material?
教頭に自転車のホイールが使えるんだっけ？他にも余った木材とかなら頼んだらもらえそう。
So Keisuke and the others were surprised at how fast Saya and Hikari fired off suggestions. And they're actually pretty good suggestions. So see, we tried to make one once before, but it didn't work out so well.
見た目にこだわらないなら廃材で十分だと思います。
ならば手分けしてみんなで集めましょう。
And I'm sure if it is in really poor condition, they can fix it, paint it, sand it, or basically I'll say like add some other parts to make it work. So we want to keep our costs as close to zero as possible. That's true. Well, expenses are always going to be an issue for any club. And more so for a minor club like this, on the verge of being shut down. And even if it's only breadcrumbs, we had to use it wisely. We were lucky the school still allowed us to use this room, let alone allocate to us any funding.
それで司教の方はどうなっていますか？
Okay, so how are we gonna house this mirror? This. So I point to the glass disc I have been working on.
これが前に話していた何でしたっけ？
So Hikari and I both looked at Saya. So if you remember, the name was kind of embarrassing, or is kind of embarrassing, and Saya doesn't really like what Hikari and Akito called it, or calls it now. So when they had Saya say the name, Saya is not pleased with this. Like, yeah, it's called the Ancient One's Evil Eye. So everyone was bewildered at the strange outburst, but continued the conversation as if they hadn't heard anything. Oh, I said it, so now what?
これが司教になるのかい？
So that's the mirror? Well, it works, it just needs to be fixed and I have to clean it up and... So he's been smoothing it down. I demonstrated to the other members of the meeting how I had been sanding the glass to get it to the right shape. And the surfaces were already starting to curve inward very slightly.
司教ってこうやって作るんですか？大変そうですね。
Yeah, so that's the back-breaking labor. I'm pretty sure if a typical person was to build a Dobsonian telescope, you'll probably buy a mirror that's already machined and cut to the right size. But it's just that they're low on budget and they already have something that they can use. So I grumble while taking a moment to relax my stiff hands. And I wonder if Akito is grinding the mirror correctly or to its right curvature. But an objective mirror has to be concave. That was just something I had to do. But I wonder if it's perfectly concave or it's lopsided. There are several stages involved in the process. The first step was rubbing down with a rough abrasive. And once I got the curvature right, I'd have to use materials with a finer and finer granularity to get that smooth finish. So basically sandpaper. So first you use the coarse paper to grind it down, and then you use the fine paper to make it all nice and smooth. And then I use the full cuts knife edge test to check the surface before finally moving on to the coating process. So I wonder what they're going to coat it with. And that would have been easy with specialized machinery, but unfortunately I had to do it all by hand. So I'm sure using all this machinery, that's going to cost a lot of money. But then again, machines, they have really excellent precision. So if you have the machines cut this glass to the correct lens shape and coat it, it'll be very, very, very close to the design specs. But since he's doing it by hand, it's a lot of work.
そうだ、写真撮っとくよ。
Wait, so how about a photo?
それ後で送ってください。ブログに載せますから。
Okay, so a photo of all of us being together and maybe something good to remember.
あよ
And out of the blue, it's like, okay, so smile.
ねえねえピカリン、宗教って何？宗教ってのは要するに一番大事な鏡だよ。
So primary, that's like main or the most important part.
はあ、全然わかんない。アキト、説明してやって。
Okay, so explain to Corona what a primary mirror is. Okay, so Corona, listen up. So the objective mirror or primary mirror is the most important part of the whole telescope.
鏡なの？レンズじゃなくて？
Well, do you know what a reflecting telescope is? Corona shook her head, and can I say I expected her, or can't say I expected her to know. So broadly speaking, there are two kinds of telescopes. So first, there's this kind. So I pointed to the neglected telescope in the corner of the room. And I'm sure this is the telescope that Akito still has with him from all those years from his parents. So this is the refracting telescope. So when you think of a telescope, you probably imagine one like this. But the one we're making is the other kind, a reflector. So refractors are probably the most well-known type, especially among amateurs. And they're small as well. And typically they're made of interlocking cylindrical chambers and a lens used as a magnifying glass for gathering light, which forms an image. And the same principle used in glasses or camera lenses. There you go. So reflectors, however, don't use lenses. Instead, they use large curved mirrors to reflect light. And Newton is credited with creating the prototype for modern reflecting telescopes. And so they're referred to as the Newtonian telescope. So reflectors are made as an alternative to the bulky refractors. Those had to be pretty huge due to the technical limitations, and some were even as tall as 60 meters. Another advantage is that they don't suffer from chromatic aberration, a distortion that causes colors to come out wrong. So basically, mirrors, they're kind of like lenses. Well, if they're curved. And what you do is you coat it with some reflective layer, which is usually silver. So for like a mirror, that's basically just a glass window with a piece of silver behind it. And obviously they put all these different layers on top of the silver to protect it from being worn off. And even the larger models are comparatively cheap to make. And Dobsonian is one kind of Newtonian reflector.
これが反 射望遠鏡ですわ。どうぞ。
So Orihime brought up an image on her tablet and handed it to Corona.
なんかバズーカ砲みたい。
Well, it does look like a bazooka. It's like you have a really big hole in the front to attract the light, or that's where light goes in, and on the other side you have this big concave reflecting mirror, and then you have a little eyepiece, and the eyepiece gets images from the big concave surface. It just goes to a smaller plane mirror that reflects it 90 degrees to the eyepiece. So I guess the ones with the wider diameter mirrors do resemble like a huge gun barrel. So have you heard of the Hubble Space Telescope, Corona? Oh, that famous telescope?
うん、知ってる。宇宙を飛んでたんだよね。
So that's a reflecting telescope.
Huh?
It's a huge reflecting telescope in orbit around the Earth. So Corona took another look at the image on the tablet.
これが宇宙に浮いてたんだ。すごいだろ。
Now, if I remember, the Hubble Space Telescope, it was delayed, and when they first launched it into space, it didn't work properly because the mirrors weren't shaped correctly, and it resulted in the image being out of focus. And obviously it was a huge waste of money, and they were able to fix it by taking out one of the instruments and putting additional lenses to help correct the images. And well, that lens assembly got taken out recently, or maybe the last 5 or 10 years, because the instruments themselves have ways to correct the images that are out of focus. And there is a bigger telescope that's currently in development. I'm not sure if they're building it now. It's called the James Webb Telescope, and it's supposed to allow NASA to go even further into space. So apparently the Hubble Space Telescope, it's pretty much at its limit. It's able to see all the images of space that it can see, and now they want to go further, and that's why the James Webb Telescope is being built. Generally speaking, the structure of the Hubble telescope is the same as the Dobsonian we were making, and a large concave mirror to gather light and reflect back images. And the Hubble Space Telescope is just a huge reflecting telescope floating through space. And while not the only space telescope, the Hubble is the largest visible light reflecting space telescope. And it's a really special piece of technology. And they launched it actually. So this entire telescope was able to fit into the cargo bay of one of the space shuttles, which sadly was retired about 9 years ago as of this recording.
ハキ兄たち、すごいもの作ってるんだね。
Well, of course, we wouldn't be sending this one into orbit, but it's nice to see someone so impressed by our idea. Well, obviously, that costs a lot of money to launch it into orbit, and like I said, it was the time when, well, here in the United States, they were still flying the space shuttle. So the good mood was quickly spread to the rest of the room. And on that note, can I get someone to take over the standing for a while? Because my hands are getting tired. I shook my poor tired hands a little.
あ、私がやりますわ。
Are you sure?
大丈夫かい、姫さん。力仕事だよ。
It's like, well, for someone like Orihime, well, she has soft hands, and that's what kind of got Akito really hard to quit the Six Stars Club in the beginning. It's like, well, for someone like you with really soft hands and really nice skin, I'm sure it's not gonna work out for you to sand the the big mirror.
問題ありませんわ。今日はこのために来たんですから。
Oh, don't worry. I can do it. So, brimming with enthusiasm, Orihime rolled up her sleeve and took his seat. Okay, so, let me do it.
どうやって磨きますの？
Well, So the others also leaned in to listen as I gave Orihime instructions.
ふーん。本当に秋とここに住んでるんだ。
Okay, so I like how Hikari's wondering about this room in general. It's like, so I do know that Akito's living here, and I think she can see some of the characteristics of it being an apartment for Akito. So maybe like extra food, clothes, all except one. So Hikari had slipped away from the crowd and was wandering around the room. She opened up a drawer and took a look at the underwear inside and nodded to herself. Yep. So this is evidence that this is an apartment for Akito. I would never have gotten away with doing that in a girl's room. Hey, what do you think you're doing?
いえ、別にどうぞお構いなく。
Well, I'm just wondering. She continued ambling around, picking up and putting down boxes from a pile in the corner.
違うか。
So I think she's looking for that little letter that she wrote to Akito shortly before he transferred. Or like she transferred. And she told Akito many times that she wants it destroyed because it's quite embarrassing. But Akito won't destroy it, and he's hiding it somewhere. And we do know where she's hiding it. Or he's hiding it. So Hikari's going to try to find that place. So you think I hide that letter in an obvious spot? I know exactly what Hikari is looking for. There you go, the love letter.
別にそういうんじゃないもん。秋との現在の生活ぶりを見てみようと思って。
No. I was not interested in looking at that. Abandoning her search for now, Hikari looked over at the old telescope.
あれ？これもしかしてあの望遠鏡？
That telescope.
うわー、懐かしい。ねえねえ、さや。何、光。ほら、見てこれ。
This telescope. So it may have looked like club property in that room, but this was in fact the telescope my mom and dad had bought for me when I was a kid. And it is the only thing that he has from his parents after they died. So distracted by the remnant from our past, Hikari seemed to completely forget that or what she was doing before. Thank goodness. So thankfully this memento telescope veered Hikari away from that letter.
お、なんだこの騒ぎは。
And it looks like Takeichi's here as well. It's like, what's going on? Takeichi came in through the still open door. I guess he wasn't used to this room sounding so lively.
わ、お兄ちゃんだ。
Uh-oh, Oni-chan's here.
なんでコロナがいるんだよ。
いいでしょ、別に。あっち行ってて。
Well, I want to come here, so don't bother me.
誰？あんたも天文部？
いや、俺はバスケ部っす。
No, I'm basketball.
お姉さんこそ誰っすか？その制服、西高？
天文部じゃないなら興味なーし。
Well, sorry, I'm busy, so... Nare quickly lost interest in Takeichi and wouldn't even spare him a passing glance. It's like, well, you're not astronomy, so I don't want to waste time with you. Hey, I'm Taki. Well, I'm kind of in the middle of something right now.
おい、アキト。
Wait. I want to talk to you for something. I told you, I'm busy, so, I'll talk to you later.
いいから。
No, it's important.
誰だ？ 今のきつそうなお姉様は。
So, who's with that girl? She has a really bad attitude. And I don't think Takeichi should say that because we know that in the past Takeichi was a big bully, always making fun of Akito, and always angry at Hikari and such. So I'll leave that to next episode. But anyways, I'm sure Takeichi is quite surprised that there's more activity going on in the astronomy club room than before. And if you remember from a while ago, when it was all quiet, Takeichi was like, well, Akito, if you want to be part of the astronomy club, you should be more active. You shouldn't just sit there thinking all about Hikari, because it's quite depressing, and I really don't like it when people have to call you the guy who never looks at stars. And I'm sure even Saya doesn't like you having that title either. So, we'll see how it goes from here. But at least, it seems that there is now more activity going on, and Akito is heading towards a more happier future compared to what it was in the beginning. And it's all thanks to Hikari and Saya being together with him again. So with that in mind, I'll see you in the next episode.